Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. A strange day at Monza today. As of recording right now, we still don't know what the grid is actually going to be after all these penalties, and that's an important detail given how these cars will line up for tomorrow, especially given Verstappen's race pace that Red Bull believe they are targeting in tomorrow's Grand Prix. Hamilton expecting a frustrating afternoon, but Leclerc for the Tifosi on pole yet again. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Big news that Alex Albon actually has appendicitis and will be having surgery to remove his appendix. So this kind of came out of nowhere, but Alex Albon will not be racing this weekend, as he says, missing out on what looks like a strong weekend. Weight reduction for Singapore and cool scars being the positive. So hopefully, wishing Albon, of course, the quickest possible recovery. That means, though, Nick de Vries was called up last minute to replace him in the Williams seat. We'll see how that went in a second. So going into today, one more penalty was discussed, with Ocon now taking another 5-place grid penalty. So this was how it lined up before qualifying. Now, the order in which these penalties are applied after qualifying, nobody really seems to know, and in the coming minutes we'll describe exactly why. It's an absolute mess, honestly. I can't believe the FIA allow this to happen, but that's what the penalties look like. What this means for the grid position is a big question mark. So out in Q1, remarkably, honestly, like Aston Martin, they brought this new rear wing and it was just terrible, but the Haas were also terrible, so they all went out in Q1, but honestly, incredibly, really, Nicholas Latifi. Nick de Vries literally hopped into that car for half an hour in FP3 and managed to stick it above Latifi, even after having a lap deleted at the end of Q3. So, yeah, that is, unfortunately for Latifi, the nail in the coffin of his Formula 1 career. I have no doubt about it, but that session just confirms Latifi is gone, and Nick de Vries will maybe not be in the Williams, but someone will be there instead of Latifi. I'm almost certain of it after that session, most certainly. Now, Q2, de Vries does go out, but he actually gets it into P13. Might have even done marginally better if not for losing the rear and going into the second chicane of the lap. But actually, Ocon also eliminated P11. That's a pretty big deal, with him getting a 5-place penalty. Bottas, Zhou, Tsunoda. Tsunoda had some great pace in session 1, but I didn't quite have enough in the end to get it through to Q. I'm not even sure he did a lap. I think maybe he had some sort of issue, but probably they realised that Hamilton was going to pip them, as was Sainz, and with Tsunoda getting his back of the grid penalty, it was pretty much over for them anyway. So they called it a day there. That meant the back of the grid being Bottas, Magnussen, Schumacher. Sainz, Hamilton was always going to be the way it was. Then Tsunoda at the back of the grid. But apart from that, things get rather messy indeed. This, though, was how things stood after Q2. I thought it was kind of interesting that both Ferraris, P1, P2, then both Red Bulls, then both Mercedes, then both McLarens, and then Alonso, of course, here, Gasly as well. So definitely an interesting setup here for Q3, where in the end it was Leclerc that did enough to put it on pole. A very impressive lap, a 120.1. Verstappen was a 10th and a half down, lost a lot of that time, I think, really in the first sector. You can see he was pretty much lost all that time in sector 1, gained a fair bit of it back in sector 2. Wasn't enough, though, to get a faster lap overall compared to Leclerc, who took pole. Sainz was P3. They didn't really bother with any of the toe stuff, which I think was understandable, because Leclerc was going to get pole anyway. The only man he was fighting here was George Russell, and that Mercedes was way off the pace today. Yes, both of those Mercedes went out for their final runs on used soft tyres. That would have been a rather significant difference. They might have been within, maybe 8/10 of a second or something of the leaders on a fresh set. We'll see their reaction here in a second, but they wanted to save those newer tyres for the race, which, could work to their favour. It might not, who knows. Norris, Riccardo, good session from Riccardo, all things considered, right? He managed to put it into Q3 and got through to what might be P4, might be somewhere else on the grid. Who honestly knows at this point? Gasly, Alonso didn't even bother putting a lap in, I think, but he was P10 regardless. So that's how things shape up. Great news for Leclerc and the Tifosi. The Ferrari seems back today. Whatever they've figured out, whether it's that France spec floor they've put on, they seem to believe they've kind of understood something now, that on these type of circuits where, back in Spa they were way off Verstappen's pace, they can now be a bit more competitive again. Maybe that's the case once again, but okay, yes, they've always been relatively good in qualifying. Can Ferrari deliver it in the race tomorrow in front of their home crowd? That remains to be seen, but in straight line pace, the Ferrari actually was pretty competitive today, and that's going to be a big deal, of course, around Monza, where traditionally it's been rather tough to overtake. Let's talk about the grid, because still, as I recall this, there's been no confirmation. I've seen Verstappen say that he's P7. I've seen Alonso say that he's P7. It's a bit of a mess. Now, if the penalties are applied in order of the qualification positions, Verstappen goes from P2 to P7, then Sainz, Perez and Hamilton move back, therefore Verstappen gets pushed up again. If it's done in a different way, then Verstappen ends up still P7. Honestly, who knows? If it's in the pinned comment, then they've decided, but as of now, they're still working it out. Honestly, what what an absolute mess. So this is what some people said, that it was going to be Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Riccardo, Gasly, Alonso, Verstappen, because to me, if Verstappen's taken a 5-place penalty, qualified P2, like surely he should start P7, like maybe he starts P4, but obviously that's a big difference, right? Behind Alonso, Gasly, Riccardo, that's a much bigger deal than if Verstappen is P4 right behind Norris, where let's say he gets Norris off the line, Russell's easy pickings in the track to Mercedes around a fast track like Monza, and then he's right on Leclerc's gearbox within about 10 laps. If he starts P7, a very different deal. So like honestly, who knows? So some are saying P4, some are saying P7. Max thinks he's P7, but then Alonso was like, well, I'll be P8, but with Perez's penalty, I'll be P7. So maybe that's how it is. So who really knows? Like the drivers don't know, the kind of media don't know, the FIA don't know. They're figuring out. I think they've changed the rules now in terms of how they apply penalties and exactly the way in which they do it. But I'm sure there's going to be drama when this does get confirmed. And either I'll put it in the pinned comment or I'll do another video later today when it does. But this is the grid that motorsport.co.uk came up with. They've got Verstappen P7, De Vries P8 actually after the penalty. So the back of the grid is not really like, everyone agrees on the back of the grid, right, with the penalties for these drivers, with Sainz, Hamilton, Tsunoda at the back, then the two, like Haas's, of course, then, well, Perez, Ocon, Bottas moving behind. Like, this isn't really a debate necessarily. When you get to the front of the grid, though, this is the real debate. And honestly, it's a massive deal for Leclerc's winning chances tomorrow if Verstappen is further back than some say he will be. Whether his penalties are applied first or last is a key differentiating factor in where Verstappen starts. But I feel like it's strange if he goes from P2 to P7 and back to P4 again. It feels like he hasn't really been punished at all, given the race pace that Red Bull believes they have. So that was Motorsport UK's version of events. This, as it stands, is Sky's version of events. They believe Verstappen's going to be P4 because they believe you apply the penalties Verstappen first because he's got the least penalty, then you apply the other penalties, and he ends up P4 again after Hamilton and, Sainz go back and stuff like this. So honestly, what's even going on? I don't know. Perez might even end up 10th here. So it's an absolute disaster class, to be honest. But as I say, I'll keep you guys updated on that one. The other, of course, part of the story is, what does this mean for the race? Even if Verstappen's P4, P7, whatever, Leclerc is on pole and in prime position to win the race tomorrow. The Ferrari looked great around there today, put on a show for the Tifosi. Yes, it's quali pace. That is what it is for Ferrari. But, if they can maintain that in the race, that's a big question mark. The concern for them is that Christian Horner was making it rather clear after qualifying concluded that they have effectively sacrificed today qualification pace for race pace, right? They think they set up their car rather well for the race tomorrow, as in it's going to be much better on their tyres. You might imagine degradation is going to be key. If both teams can go for a one-stop, then probably it works out in Ferrari's favour. If Ferrari's degradation is high, if they don't, seemingly Red Bull are running a bit more downforce actually to potentially protect the tyres a bit more, allow them to do the one-stop with, Max at the wheel, you would imagine that maybe they still have an advantage. So, of course, you won't rule out Verstappen winning from wherever he starts on the grid, and Horner, with his, smug grin on him, believes that maybe they've got something left in the tank for tomorrow. Mercedes, few words on them because they were, rather far off the pace, given the way they started the weekend, only a few tenths off in practice one, to end up, 1.3 seconds off the pace, both Hamilton and Russell in the final lap. And this is what Hamilton has to say. It was an okay session, wasn't my best. I think we were going to be naturally off the pace around here. Fifth was the best I could do, losing some time in the last sector, which is effectively a straight line. So, of course, that's going to be dealt with quite significantly by just pure straight line performance from the Mercedes, saying that he didn't really make any mistakes and it was a pretty good lap. And of course, tomorrow, with the rear wings being smaller than some circuits, the DRS is less impactful. Therefore, it's still difficult to overtake. So he is expecting quite a frustrating day, starting from P19 to try and make progress in the field. If he does have the extra set of soft tyres, which it seems like he does, he might have some advantage over some of the guys around him. But I think Sainz also has an extra set of soft, so it might not be ideal. But yeah, Hamilton's thinking that it might be Imola all over again. George Russell, rather more pessimistic maybe in terms of where he thought they would be and where they ended up. As he says, I think the session ran away from us, like to be about 1.4 seconds off. He thought they'd be between 3 and 7 tenths behind. Like, as he says, I'm glad that Lando or Fernando didn't jump us because that was the risk they took at the end by not doing a final lap on their new soft tyres. It seemed clear to me that Hamilton, there was no need for him to use a new set of softs because he was always going to lose to Sainz and that was his battle. I thought Russell might try it, but Russell again was always going to be P2. So they decided not to bother with the new set of soft tyres, save them for tomorrow. And he says, look, he's not too disappointed for the actual placings, but yeah, a bit of a shame they're so far off the pace. So we shall see if their race tomorrow is any different because he does think tomorrow they can still fight with Charles Leclerc and he reckons that there's no chance of fighting with Verstappen. So he's pretty confident again. Verstappen will have have the clear advantage tomorrow in terms of race pace, and the Ferraris might be closer to the Mercedes than you might expect them to be. But starting from P2 should at least give Russell a chance of at least getting a podium, right? You would think that, podium at minimum should be the expectation for Russell tomorrow. Hamilton's going to have a tough time, I think, even getting into the points, but who knows, right, how it works out with the DRS trains and the like around this circuit tomorrow. Going to be a different story, possibly to last year and years before, but I suppose we'll see. And also, Russell does reckon that Max Verstappen, regardless of where he starts, is going to be within the lead in about 15 laps or something. So we'll see if that transpires in reality, but it might not be quite as easy as Spa to make those overtakes happen. So definitely tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. As I say, I'll try and update you guys either in the pinned comment or whatever on what exactly this grid position looks like, because that's a big deal where Verstappen starts, and I'm sure if he is starting P4, there will be some controversy. Very much tweet your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.